So Warzone has been out for about 2 weeks, and predominantly I personally play the Battle Royale version of the game, and I think that's the same with most people who watch my videos or are really into Warzone. Now, I'm sitting here around 25-ish wins. By the time this video comes out, it'll probably be a little bit more than that. But I've looked at my Twitter, I've looked at my YouTube comments, and a lot of people are struggling to get wins in Battle Royale. So what I thought I would do is I would put together a big list of every tip that I can personally think of to help you guys get more wins. Now, these tips are going to range from tips for very beginners who have never really played Call of Duty before to very in-depth tips for people who have been playing Call of Duty for years and are very specific to certain things you can do that are going to help you get more wins. This is a list of 100 tips that'll help you get more wins in Warzone. And let's just dive into it because 100 is a big number. So the first couple that we have here are simply settings that you should have set up in game that pretty much everyone should have on. So the first one is turn off film grain. This just makes the screen more grainy and more difficult to see your enemies. The second one is similar, turn off motion blur and weapon blur. Once again, it just blurs your screen, makes it more difficult to see enemies. Next we have aim assist, and this is for only console players. The two settings that you want to use here are standard and linear. I'm not going to go in depth as to why, it just makes it the most exact for your thumbstick movements, and give it a try. I think you'll appreciate it. Another option that was added in with Warzone in Modern Warfare is your type of minimap. Now, the type of minimap that you want to use is a square minimap with rotation. Why do you want to use a square minimap? It actually reveals more area on the minimap than the circular one, which is going to make it so that more enemies show up on your minimap when they shoot their weapon at a longer range. Use square, use rotation, trust me on this one. Up next for you PC players, make sure you have an extended field of view. That way you can see a larger area on the screen. It may make enemies in certain situations look a little bit smaller, but at the same time, you're going to be able to see more of your peripherals, which is going to help you not get flanked. The last setting you should change is Contextual Tap. This makes it so that when to pick something up off the ground, you don't have to hold square, you can just tap it and it picks it up. Now you got to be careful because if you're going to reload and you're in a vehicle, this might actually make you exit the vehicle, so it's going to take a little bit to get used to, but it's really going to help in that initial drop in those first few gunfights to pick up those weapons that much faster. Now that you got your settings right, you're actually going to go in game, and the very first thing that happens in game is you drop in. Now, there are 3 different types of drops based off of how far you actually want to go. The first one is just a straight dive bomb. If you're going to a hot drop that is right underneath the C-130, dive straight down. It's pretty straightforward. You go straight, you press straight forward. The second one is for distance drops, and as far as distance drops goes, there's no real good way of doing them. You basically just have to pull your parachute and float to where you want to go. Now, the third is the fastest way to go as far as possible. Now, you can't get all the way across the map with this. I would say about half to 2/3 of the way across the map, and what you do is you dive straight down until you hit maximum velocity, which is right around 50, as you can see on the right there, and then you pull your chute. And then you cut your chute, go back up to 50, pull your chute again. You do this over and over again until you're right above the area that you actually want to drop. Now, the way pulling your chute works is that if you haven't pulled your chute for the entire drop, your character will automatically pull his chute. If you've pulled it once in the air, then you have to press the deploy chute button before you hit the ground, or you will just hit the ground and die. Now, you actually want to pull your chute once in the air, just once, so that you can get closer to the ground before your chute deploys, therefore having a smaller area where you have to float. This is going to allow you to get to the ground before your enemies do, get the first weapon, and win that first gunfight. Now, once you're on the ground, one thing you're going to want to avoid is the zone or the gas. It absolutely hits like a truck. If you get stuck in it, you're pretty much screwed. Now, the other thing that hits like a truck is a truck. Don't be afraid to hop in a vehicle and run some people over. Another thing with damage is there is no team damage, so you don't have to worry about running your team over, shooting your team. In fact, you can shoot through your team to hit enemies. Now, the way that health works in this game is that you have a base of 100 health. That's the white bar down in the bottom left. But on top of that, the way armor works is that you can have 3 armor shards at a time. Each one of them is worth 50 health, and it applies to your entire body, including your head. But if you shoot someone in the head, it's going to take more of their armor off because there is a headshot multiplier. Multiplier. Basically, you just want to think of armor as extra 150 health if you have 3 pieces of armor. So if you really want to destroy someone's armor the fastest way possible, headshots are key because that's how you're going to do the most damage to their armor and the most damage to them. Now, there is also a way to tell how much armor your enemy has left. If you shoot them and there is a white armor hit marker, they still have armor. If a blue armor hit marker pops up, that means you broke their armor, and if no armor comes up when you shoot them, they have no armor. If they have no armor, that's when you want to go after them. If one of your teammates goes down, you can pick them back up, and to do so, this is going to take exactly 5 seconds. Also, you can use a perk called Tune Up, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a second, but when using Tune Up, it only takes 3 seconds to revive teammates. Moving into looting, the best way to loot is chests, and as it turns out, chests make a pretty loud noise in this game. If you see a different weapon with different rarities, it doesn't mean that one does more damage than the other, it just means that one has more attachments than the other. Early on when you're looting, before you're able to buy drop kits, which we'll dive into in a second, the pretty much best weapon that you can find in chests or on the ground is the MP7. If you see that, pick it up, kill people with it. The actual best weapon that you can find in loot boxes is the War Machine or Grenade Launcher. I've only ever seen this thing once. I've played over 100 games, so it's super rare, but it's pretty insane. Throughout the rest of the game, the main thing that you're going to be looting for is money and armor. They're pretty much the most important things you're going to find on dead bodies, on anything else. Always be looking for money and armor. Early on, the most important thing that you're going to buy with that money is drop kits. They cost $6,000 and are by far the most important item. They are the only way of getting your attachments, your weapons, and of course, most importantly, perks. There will also be 2 loadout drops that come in seemingly randomly. They're actually not randomly. They come in at the very end of the first circle closing and the very beginning of the 5th circle. I'll show the timers zoomed in on screen here so you know the exact timings. So now that you have either waited for a drop kit to come in or bought one, what are some things that you actually want in them? So I made a video talking about the top 10 weapons, so I'm not going to go over that again. If you want to know the best weapons, just check that out. But some individual things that you might want are, number 1, Monolithic Suppressors. I pretty much use these on every single one of my weapons in Warzone simply because it helps me stay off that mini-map, which is hugely important. On my sniper, I use a thermal sight. It is so much easier to see people in this game. It is insane. On top of that, the piece of equipment that I use is a heartbeat sensor. A heartbeat sensor, anytime you scan, can tell you if there's an enemy hiding in a building, behind you, pretty much anywhere. It's my go-to piece of equipment. It is really overpowered. One little cool tip you probably didn't know about the heartbeat sensor is if you're holding it and you're standing near a window, when your character actually goes to put it away, the window will actually explode and then you can see through the window. This is actually useful because instead of shooting through the windows and kind of giving away your spot, you can do this kind of sneakily and then the enemies won't know where you are and you can see through the window. As far as some perks that may be important to you, first of all, I use Cold-Blooded. This helps you counteract thermals, and everyone is using thermals. You don't show up on them. You don't show up as a bright white glow, which is very helpful. On top of that, the second perk that is also helpful is Ghost. This protects you from UAVs and heartbeat sensors, and those are another couple items that are used quite frequently. I also just recommend reading through all of the different perks because the perks in this game do different things in Warzone than they do in Multiplayer. For example, Point Man gives your team more money for completing challenges, so it might be useful for one man in your squad to actually be running this. Also, this is a pretty big tip. If you didn't know this, you can actually use Overkill and Ghost at the same time. What you do is when you buy your original drop kit, you buy a class that has Overkill. In other words, it has your sniper and your AR, or your sniper and your SMG. When the second drop kit drops in at the end of first zone, what you are going to do is go to that loadout drop kit and buy the same class, but instead of with Overkill, it has Ghost. Then you just simply take your pistol and pick up your sniper or your other weapon instead of that pistol, and boom, you have Overkill and you have Ghost. Problem solved. Now, the next most important thing that you can buy at one of those buy zones is self-revive, and there's actually a couple of tricks with this one. First off, whenever you go down and you have self-revive, always start using it immediately. Now, you may think that's counterintuitive. If your teammate can save you, why would you start using it? Well, what you can actually do is start using your self-revive, and at the very end of the self-revive, have your teammate run over to you, heal you in like 0.5 seconds, and then that self-revive was never used. You have it for that next life. It essentially makes it so that your teammate reviving you is almost instant. The other key with self-revive is knowing if your enemies have self-revived. Basically, anytime any enemy is revived, the same exact noise will play. It is this one here. And clearly, I need to listen to my own advice. Now, after this, the next most important thing to buy is a UAV. This is by far the best kill streak in the game. It basically tells you where all of the enemies in the map are, and at the very end, the final circle, it is incredibly important. Now, there's a couple things you need to know about the UAV. First of all, when you call in a UAV, it actually shows the elevation of your enemies. If they're above you, it'll show a little arrow above the little red dot. If they're below you, it shows a little arrow below the little red dot. On top of that, if you call in 3 UAVs at a time, in other words, all 3 of your squad mates call in a UAV, you get an advanced UAV. In other words, it shows the actual direction that your enemies are looking as well, which is incredibly powerful in that last zone. Another thing that you're going to notice by this clip here is that not everyone shows up on an advanced UAV. If you have Ghost, like we talked about before, you actually don't show up on an advanced UAV, unlike in Multiplier. So that's another perk to using Ghost. Another little trick that I use is if I have extra money, all my team has self-res and UAV, what I'll do is if I'm running past a buy station and I have extra money, I'll just call in my UAV and buy another UAV. That way, if there's any enemies hiding in buildings near us, we can hunt them down, take their money, buy more UAVs. It's just basically a way to constantly be knowing where the enemies are. Another way you're going to be able to help out your team is by actually sharing money and resources. So the main thing that you're going to do this with is probably money, but if your teammate's close by like $500 to buying a UAV, you may drop them some of your money, press down on the D-pad, select what you want to drop. You can also do this with armor and ammunition as well. This is incredibly helpful if your partner just revived and came back from the gulag or something along those lines. Now, speaking of being out of ammo, there's a couple things you can do here. First of all, when you first get your weapons from the drop kit, a lot of the time you're low on ammo. So one thing you can do is while you're looting, you can find a munitions box. I recommend saving this munitions box till after you get your drop kit, then calling it in, and then everyone on your party can actually get full ammo. Another way of doing this is there's 2 different buildings in the map that have ammo stashes. They are police stations and weapon shops. They can be found all over the map, but I've marked all of the ones I have personally found on this map here to help you guys out. Now, let's say you do go down and your team isn't able to revive you. The first thing that's going to happen is you're going to go to the gulag. This is another way of actually respawning. If you win a 1v1 gunfight, you spawn back into the game with just your pistol once again. Now, I'm going to give you some basic strategies to help you win more gulag fights. The first thing you're going to want to do is to either push hard to the right or hard to the left. There's always a little bit of cover on either side, and what this does is it shows you 2 potential lanes that the enemy can come down, either the opposite side or the middle lane. If you don't see the enemy, you know he's either still in spawn or on the same side that you are on. On top of this, in the gulag, it is incredibly beneficial to use either your stun grenades, smoke grenades, or your C4 or explosives. Make sure you're using them to your advantage. They're hugely beneficial and a lot of people forget about them. Also, if your teammate dies at the same time as you, he can actually watch your gulag and tell you where the enemy actually is, and it makes it really easy for you to win that gunfight. Another thing you can look out for is a lot of the times the people spectating will just throw rocks at the people inside. So if they're throwing rocks at a location, your enemy is probably in that location. Now, if you do lose the gulag, don't worry too much. Your teammates can still buy you back for $4,500. Now, when you do spawn back in, you're at a huge disadvantage because you don't have any of the weapons and everyone else in the lobby does. So one thing I recommend is actually just floating up in the air until a loadout drop comes in, dropping in on it. That way you have all of your weapons right away. Now, when you're playing, one thing you're going to notice is footstep volume absolutely sucks. Someone can sprint up behind you and you will hear absolutely nothing, and other times footsteps will be as loud as hell. So there's really no telling when footsteps will actually work. It is a lot easier to hear footsteps in solos though. Now, there are a couple of ways to make your footsteps absolutely silent, one of which is using Deadsilence, which you can loot. Deadsilence also speeds up your movement speed, so if you're about to get stuck in the zone, it's actually a good way to use it to outrun it. But if you don't have Deadsilence, you can crouch walk, which makes your footsteps almost silent, or aim down down sights and move, which makes your footsteps very silent. The other thing is ladders are completely silent. It sounds like you're making noise when you climb up them, but to the enemies, they can't hear you whatsoever. So use that to your advantage, and when there's a ladder near you, be careful because someone could be sneaking up on you. The other thing you're going to notice is weapon noises in this are really, really loud, and sometimes they sound like they're right beside you. Most of the time, they're not. Rely on your UAV to see if those enemies are close to you. The only time they wouldn't show up is if they're using suppressors. So be careful, but at the same time, you're going to hear weapon noises all the time. Now, there are plenty of vehicles on the map, ranging from trucks to helicopters to ATVs. The thing you have to be careful about with these vehicles is that when you're driving them or your team is in them, you show up as a red vehicle on the map and everyone knows where you are. So what this means is you don't want to be using vehicles all the time because you're going to show up on the map, people are going to know where you are and try to kill you. So the main circumstance that you're going to be using these vehicles is to get into the safe zone safely without taking any damage from the gas. That being said, though, if you are driving in vehicles, a safe way to do so is make sure you are seat swapping with your teammates. In other words, constantly pressing that seat swap button so that you're moving seats and making it harder for your enemies to shoot you. Essentially, anytime you're not driving the vehicle, this is what you want to be doing. Now, let's say the enemy is driving a vehicle at you, trying to run you over. All it takes is one C4 to completely disable that vehicle, and if you're as good as my friend Lazy, you're just going to kill the entire enemy team in that vehicle anyway with that C4. Now, you can also shoot vehicles to disable them as well. It does take quite a few bullets, but once you do disable them, the enemy can't move and they're essentially sitting duck. Another thing is when you hear a running vehicle, it doesn't necessarily mean someone has driven it there. All vehicles except helicopters are constantly running, so if you hear one running, it doesn't mean someone's around you. That being said, if it's parked in a weird spot, that's what you need to look out for. And finally, one other difference between this and Blackout, you can actually exit a vehicle going at any speed and you will take 0 damage. So even if your teammates blazing along the highway, you can exit, you will take no damage whatsoever. Now, when entering a building, there's doors on pretty much every building. So what I suggest is once you've entered the building, close the door behind you. It's going to let you know when anyone comes through that door with a loud noise. And on top of that, it'll make enemies think that no one's there. If you're on the other side of this and want to enter a building silently, slowly go up to the door, holding aim down sights, press square to open that door. It'll kind of peek the door open, and then you can slowly push through without the door making any noise. Another thing to look out for is sniper glint. If you see the glint of a sniper, it means the sniper is either looking at you or around you, which means you're going to get shot soon. Another item that you can get in game is the gas mask. The gas mask will protect you for 12 seconds against the gas, which is a big deal. The problem with the gas mask, though, is when you put it on when you go in the gas, you can't do anything else. You can't heal yourself, you can't shoot, you can't aim. So just know that if you're going into the gas, there's going to be like a second where you're basically useless. The next thing we're going to look at is one of the biggest ways to earn money, and that is contracts. Contracts are basically challenges that are scattered around the map that you can see the minute you drop in. You can look at where they are, and when you pick one up, it gives you a contract that you can complete and get money and sometimes other items. The first one that we're looking at here is the bounty. This is the one where it gives you the objective to eliminate an enemy team. The thing you need to know about this one is it gives you the closest enemy team to you, which is essentially a mini UAV because you can know exactly where the bad guys are. You can go and kill them, or at least know if they're getting close to you. The next type of contract is a scavenger contract, and this one just sends you around to get 3 different chests. This one's actually good for early on because in the chest, you actually get good items like armor and money. And then finally, we have recon contracts. These are important because upon completing them, it actually shows you where the next zone is. And if you complete 3 of these challenges in one game, it'll actually show you where the final zone is. Now, the downside to doing a recon contract is it shoots a yellow flare up into the air. So if you ever see a yellow flare, there is a team there doing a recon contract. You can either go kill them or just take note that they're there. There's also another type of flare, a red flare. These flares go up into the air when someone is at a buy station and buys back a teammate. So again, same sort of thing. When you see one of these flares, you know a team's there, and you're actually at an advantage if it's a red flare because one of those players is not going to have good loot, so you can go and kill them relatively easily. Another important thing you can do is ping. This is exceptionally important if you're playing with players who don't have mics. So you can ping locations by pressing up on the D-pad if you want to go to a specific location. If you see an enemy, you can double tap up on it, and it will actually hard ping an enemy and show their exact location even if they're moving. You can also ping individual items like armor or weapons, and it'll show your teammates where they are on the ground, so if they need something to pick up, you can show them right where to go. Another important thing to know is the maximum range that you can ping ping something in the game is 450 meters. Anything further than that, you won't be able to ping. You'll have to ping something closer than that. Another thing to listen for while playing the game is parachutes. Often enemies respawn and sometimes will parachute near you. If they do, you'll hear the parachute and it's very easy to shoot them in the air and kill them before they even hit the ground. Now, there are a couple of areas on the map that have water. I wouldn't recommend trying out swimming. Actually, you know what? I would recommend it. I would. Give it a shot. Another perk that I like to use is a third perk called Tracker. It shows enemies' footsteps when they are near you. This is good for close quarters battles in buildings or if they're going up or down stairs. When you hear the announcer call out personal UAV inbound, it's not actually a UAV. It's actually a recon drone that you can shoot down. So if you see it flying in the air, shoot it down. Personal UAV gone. Also, yes, you can put a C4 on there and try to fly it into some people. If you run into stopping power rounds, pick them up, put them in your weapon right away. That way you can pick up another field upgrade and you can still use the stopping power rounds as the next round of bullets in your weapon. The more contracts that you do in an individual game, the more money you actually get from them because a multiplier gets added to the bonus. If you use the perk fully loaded on any of your weapons, when you pick up a drop kit, that drop kit has full ammo and you don't need to pick any up. Mounting your weapon to a wall or surface greatly reduces the recoil and makes it easier to shoot your enemies. When you're picking your loadout from the drop kit, make sure you have a look at where the zone should be ending, and if it's ending in an area that's a little bit busier, maybe choose an SMG, like if you're going downtown. If it's a big open field, make sure you have a sniper. So choose your loadout based off of where the zone's ending. When you're dropping in off the beginning, landing on contracts is a good way to get the economy rolling and get some early money to buy your drop kits. Using thermal's a good way to scout ahead to where you're going because you're going to be able to see where enemies are, you're going to be able to see loadout drops and pretty much anything. Basically what I'm getting at is thermal is OP as hell. That being said, the one thing thermal can't do is look through windows. You can't see through windows at all with thermal, and sometimes you can't see through windows at all even if you don't have thermal. Windows are pretty picky. If you are sniping on roofs, try to snipe on roofs that have an edge around them. That way if you do get downed, it's basically a free revive and the other team can't shoot you. The best tip of all I can give you is make sure you have the high ground. Star Wars had it right.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
Seriously, having high ground in this game is a massive advantage, especially in Final Zone. Try to always have high ground and it's going to help you win a lot of games. And finally, in this game, there are quite a few campers, so always follow Captain Price's advice.
Check those corners. Move. Check those corners.
But ladies and gentlemen, that is 100 tips and tricks in Warzone. Hopefully there was something in here that helped you out and potentially helped you get more wins in Warzone. If there is, I'd love it if you could hit that like button. This video took me forever to edit together, put together, so all the likes you guys can manage, I really do appreciate it. Also, if you like what you see here, want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you turn notifications on. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace out.
We are reaching for the stars, but we're